Let's say you were trying to staff a social media site. Who would you hire? Well, obviously, since it's a tech business, you would hire tech people, coders, software engineers to keep the place running. Then you'd hire an administrative staff because you had to, some lawyers, a caterer, a flack or two, maybe an interior decorator if you wanted HQ to look good. But how many spies would you hire? Well, probably none. Spies have nothing to do with the mission of a social media company. They would not be needed, and you wouldn't hire any opera singers either. Yet, for some reason, Twitter seemed to need an awful lot of spies. The upper ranks of Twitter, we now know, were absolutely loaded with people who once did intel work for government agencies. At least 15 of these people, and possibly many more. Most of them were hired in the wake of Donald Trump's election. Now, what were these people doing all day at what was supposedly a social media company? Well, that's the question, isn't it? We know that James Baker, who came from the FBI, has been accused of secretly censoring incriminating internal files before Elon Musk could release them to the public. Baker was fired for that, so that's some of what James Baker was doing at Twitter. But how about Charles Smith of Twitter's Trust and Safety Department? Smith joined Twitter after working at U.S. Cyber Command. Or how about Jeff Tokadjer, formerly a director of Naval Counterintelligence? What was he doing? Or Kevin Michelina, or Doug Hunt, or Mark Jaruzelski, or Douglas Turner, or Karen Walsh, Russell Handor, Vincent Lucera. All of these people once worked for the FBI as well. Their colleague Jeff Carlton came from the CIA. Patrick Conlon once worked at the NSA, and so on. And it wasn't just American intel officers who found a home at Twitter. The company hired foreign spies too. In January, Peter Zatko was fired from his position as Twitter's head of security. Reportedly, Zatko lost his job because he complained about the level of control that foreign intelligence agencies had over virtually all of Twitter's operations. According to Zatko, there were operatives on Twitter's payroll from other governments, including China and India, and they had access to private user data. And those are just the details that we know about. Elon Musk was asked recently how many former FBI agents are currently employed by Twitter, but he wouldn't say. It's all pretty weird. Could it be that while the rest of us imagined that Twitter was a social media site, a place to vent about politics and sports and the Kardashians, could it be that Twitter was actually, maybe primarily, a propaganda tool and intelligence gathering apparatus for a variety of intel agencies? Well, yes, that's possible. And you can see why various governments would want access to the information that Twitter had. Keep in mind that Twitter's direct message DM feature functioned for many years as a kind of private text app for some of the world's most prominent people. So if you wanted to know what high government officials really thought, or if you wanted to know what well-informed sources were telling reporters off the record, you would want to see those messages. Did Twitter executives ever share those DMs, those private messages, with anyone outside the company without a warrant? We strongly suspect that they did. The proof, of course, resides on Twitter's servers, along with a lot else. Think about it. If Twitter has been functioning as an arm of government intel agencies, and clearly it has been, then its internal documents will contain information about all kinds of things, not just about the silencing of Donald Trump, not just about Tony Fauci's buffoonish lies about the COVID shot, big history-shaping events, the sabotage of Nord Stream 2, for example, the supposed poison gas attacks in Syria, both of them, the imprisonment of Julian Assange, why is he there? The theft of incriminating emails from the DNC, what was that story? The motive behind the Russian invasion of Ukraine, and much, much more. In other words, Elon Musk now has control of the most significant trove of secret information ever to reside in private hands. So far, we have not seen much of it, and you have to wonder why we haven't. Let's hope that we do. So Brazil held its general election back in October, and there were a lot of concerns about whether the election was on the level. Were all the votes counted, for example? Was this a fair election? But Brazil's top courts banned any investigation or discussion of the topic. And now, not surprisingly, Brazil is descending into chaos. Police are shooting at people. Matt Termond is an investigative journalist who's one of the few in American media to cover Brazil. He joins us tonight with an update on what's happening there. Matt, thanks for coming. What is happening in Brazil right now and why?
Well, we are in day 44 of continuous protests with millions of Brazilians taking to the street to exercise their constitutional right, free assembly, free protest, as well as their God-given right, that is absolutely enshrined in Brazilians' order and progress, its rule of law. But at the same time, the Supreme Court, yesterday, they certified Lula's election. That is akin to our January 6th, where we certify the presidential election. And upon certification, with the protest continuing, the Supreme Court Justice, Chief Justice Alexander de Moraes, who is head of the Supreme Court and the subsidiary court, the Supreme Electoral Court, issued an arrest warrant for one of the protest leaders, who happens to be an indigenous leader from the Amazon, the Xavante tribe, and upon his arrest, protests continued, and then it actually erupted into violence. And in 44 days, there has been no violence, no arson, no vandalism. And you know how you know? Because you would have been reading all about it everywhere in the Brazilian mainstream press and even the global press. It has been peaceful and prayerful, and the people just want to be heard. They want to see a military audit done, and the Supreme Court has blocked that. So they continue to protest.
The parallels are amazing. And so, by the way, is the information control by the social media companies. Matt Tierman, thank you so much for that update tonight. Well, as if America didn't have enough drug problems, there is a new drug being sold apparently legally at gas stations in your neighborhood that's very serious and can have deadly consequences. We'll tell you what it is next. Looks like Sam Bankman-Fried, who was beloved by the financial press and the Democratic Party, paid for a lot of media organizations like Semaphore, may have orchestrated the biggest financial fraud in history. Now, he's been arrested in the Bahamas. There's just been a major development in that case. Fox's Trace Gallagher, as always, has the details for us. Hey, Trace.
Hey, Tucker, just weeks ago, Sam Bankman-Fried was a billionaire. Now he says he's down to just $100,000. Still, a judge in the Bahamas denied bail, saying that he was a flight risk. The judge also wants Bankman-Fried to remain in the Bahamas until February 8th, and Bankman-Fried's lawyers say they will fight U.S. extradition. Meantime, the charges include wire fraud, bank fraud, securities fraud, and conspiracy to commit campaign finance violations after handing out tens of millions of dollars in illegal donations almost exclusively to Democrats. In fact, Bankman-Fried spent $39 million in the recent midterms elections, second only to George Soros. And in 2020, SBF was directly and indirectly one of President Biden's biggest donors. But the White House won't say if Biden will return the campaign contributions. White House Press Secretary Karine Jean-Pierre gave one of her standard answers. Watch.
So look, I'm covered here by the Hatch Act, limited on what I can say, and anything that's connected to political contributions from here, I would have to refer you to the DNC.
But as many point out, the president's opinion does not fall under the Hatch Act. Then again, KJP has used the Hatch Act to remain silent on numerous issues. We were supposed to hear from SBF today testifying before Congress. Instead, he was arrested at the 11th hour. And former federal prosecutors say the arrest does not make any sense because normally prosecutors want suspects to talk because they tend to indict themselves. Clearly, somebody in a position of power did not want to hear what SBF had to say. Tucker.
So he's arrested right before the testimony. Amazing. Trace Gallagher.